Hello, this is Mark Boyer, and this is a short informative video on this story or this one-page pamphlet called On Offending Activists. And I surely did offend a lot of activists, okay? And I'm sorry, but it has to be done, okay? Everyone's entering into a trap, and this explains it rather well. And there's some activists out there that have to change their course because you're harming everyone by going to the federal courts, okay? Period. Now, let me explain the history of the federal court. Harper was elected to power, and he went to the United States and signed off on the continuity of agreement, continuity of government agreement that Martin had already been talking about before, okay, and was very happy with. But Harper's the one who actually signed it in. And basically, at that time, at a news conference, he made it clear, and has said many times since then, that Canada is entering a new world order, and it's going to be surrendering its sovereignty, and he knows Canadians aren't going to like this. Now, in 2009, the Harper actually enacted on that because Washington, under the continuity of government, shortly thereafter, Ottawa became just like Washington, D.C., a district, okay? And it now flies the coat of arms of Canada, okay? In the rest of Ontario, they fly the coat of arms of the Order of the Garter in the provincial courts there. Okay, the federal court, the Supreme Court of Canada, and the Federal Court of Appeals changed from being the Order of the Garter to the Order of Parliament. Okay, now they're flying, and basically that says that the Supreme Court of Canada and the Federal Court of Appeals are no longer under the supremacy of the law. They're under the supremacy of Parliament because they technically answer to Parliament now. Okay? And now you get to this federal court. Federal court used to have the coat of arms of the Order of the Garter, which is the supremacy of the law under the bar. And now, go to the article. It's this picture right here. Okay? You see that there? Okay? That openly says on the bottom, droit admiralty, okay? Now that means it's admiralty law. Admiralty law is what Harper created there, and it was to abandon our sovereignty because this here is a NATO court, an IMF, NAFTA, NATO court in the and its sole function is to protect the economy. All those foreign obligation contracts that we have with the government and foreign corporations in order to do business in Canada. That's where Canada would get sued if a corporation lost a dime. Okay? Now, under the United Nations rules and regulations, they say medical access to marijuana and research are covered under their jurisdiction. But you know what? No one's ever gone and asked the federal court to rule on a pot issue. But it can, because its mandate is to administer and regulate the medical use of marijuana, which is what the courts say we are doing, and somehow they have to accommodate in law. Okay? Now, these cases that are going before the... Okay. Section 55 of the CDSA specifies there that the Harper is going to be getting adjudicators to rule on this. Okay? Check out my article on S55 here. I'll post it there. It's important. Okay? Read it. Your rights are being stolen. Okay? Now, in that report there, it says that X, Y, and no, the W, X, and Y provisions of one, first section, is all about adjudicators who will be able to create laws. Now, create laws means they've never been asked to do anything, but now that they're being asked to rule on it, that means the federal courts can create rules and regulations and prescribe form, send this entire new package to Parliament, vote it in, and then they become the drug cartel courts of Canada, because they'll be literally the drug sellers of Canada. Okay? This is the loss of our sovereignty. Okay? Anyone who thinks they can file in federal court and get anything but, this here, that's NATO, IMF courts. And if you think, or if a lawyer thinks he can walk into that courtroom and get a court ruling in favor of the people, is dreaming in Technicolor. And in fact, you're falling for the trap of why the Harpster created this federal court in the first place, because when he formed it, he said it was to take away our sovereignty. Okay? And if Canadians are so stupid as to apply to the federal court for settlement, then you are making yourself a slave. You are asking a court in a foreign country to settle a domestic matter. And their duty is to uphold corporations' rights to make a profit. And if they don't make a profit, then they could sue Canada. Okay? That court has only one function: to make corporations like the pharmaceutical industry not lose a dime from ever legalizing anything to do with pot. Now, they have a convention where they can rule on medical access rights. That's what the United Nations said. And that's what Mr. Conroy and company and the MMAR coalition is asking them to do. They're going, please give us human rights to grow our pot like we used to, and please do it. Well, you know what? That court is obligated to screw you. That's all there is to it. It's under international obligations to make sure they are not good about pot. Now, bottom line is, I mentioned this and said, maybe people didn't know this trap existed. Okay? Now, the trap is even bigger than that. Okay? Harper really went out of his way when he came up and said, hey guys, you guys have got to pay a 5%, or Revenue Canada said, to the clubs here, and made it clear. He says, we don't care what you say, you're giving us a 5% GST tax on your pot sales, and you're going to get no benefit from this at all. A prostitute could pay this tax, but we still could bust her, and she'd have no remedy because she was paying this tax. And that's the case they use, okay? And they've scared a lot of clubs in here to say, oh, we got to pay this GST, we got to pay this GST. Well, you know what? GSTs are signed affidavits to the effect that you collected and made all this money on a criminal activity called selling marijuana. Okay? In violation of the CDSA. Now, you leave that decision to a federal court, and they'll screw you. It's impossible not to. Okay, seriously. Okay? Their mandate is to make sure corporations don't lose money. And you're walking in there saying, oh, please, please, please give us some human rights. And you're pissing on your feet. In fact, it's worse than that. You're making yourself a slave because you're asking for foreign intervention on a strictly domestic matter. Okay? Period. You're allowing the federal court to create case law and do it. Now, let's go back to Section 55. Section 55 is all about having the Solicitor General's office act as the authority to enforce this. Okay? Solicitor General's office, the Attorney General's office controls the police. Okay? That's but the Solicitor General's office controls the sheriffs. Okay? They don't control the police, they control the sheriffs and a few other bodies of, judges and things like this. Now, if you're asking them to enforce the laws, it's sheriffs who are going to be imposing the law, enforcing the law. And sheriffs are there to impose tax rulings. Okay? So I refuse to believe that sooner rather than later, when they get a report from a compassion club or a dispensary saying, we've paid these taxes, or the grower, we've paying this GST, they will use it against you and file in tax court. And that means sheriffs come in. So the city of Vancouver and the cities all around, all the mayors of the BC say they're not going to use their police to intervene on anything. And that's carefully worded wording, because it's not going to be the police who do it. It's going to be sheriffs who do it, because that's who the Solicitor General has under him. And the biggest thing sheriffs do is enforce tax laws. Tax laws are extremely brutal, okay? If you're charged under them by the Solicitor General and the CDSA or the MMPR Annex Program, and it's being done through the federal courts. This is they're making you a slave, okay? Now the reality is how do you prevent this? Okay? And the reality is John Conroy and company needs to do a video to explain how going to federal court is not going to make them a slave under the IMF courts. It's not going to make them abandon their sovereignty, because they're going to court on March 18th. Okay? The Supreme Court on Friday, stayed 18 people who have filed under the MMPR, and they're bringing exclusively Conroy and company and the coalition, the MMIR coalition against the prohibition repeal, okay? And they're going to court on the 18th of March, where they're going to sell everybody out, because that's a class action suit. And from their actions, they're going to make everyone under the MMPR program those classes of persons who are stripped of all their rights. Now, Mr. Conroy knows better than that, okay? He knows it. And he knows I'm calling him up on the carpet here. Now, Conroy needs to respond to this. And people who are registered to that MMMAR trap, get out of it. Call Mr. Conroy, say, take me off that petition, okay? Because he's screwing you. He's a lawyer who's sold to the New World Order. I'm glad to say not all lawyers have done it. But if Mr. Conroy cannot back down, or Mr. Jason, Jason can't back, from the coalition can't back down from this, then you're screwing yourself. You're making yourself slaves. I don't know how else to say it. It's pathetic. And on this, I really don't have any good news. Okay, other than we're going to tax court with a city in a provincial court that still has the order of the garter, the supremacy of the law, and we're asking to pay a sales tax. Now go to the video I put up yesterday. Look at it. It actually is a solution that goes into a tax court where we can't lose. And the clubs here and the clubs all over the place are being set up for a tax court that they can't win. They're going to a federal court where they're going to change their jurisdiction and make themselves all slaves. I get passionate about this. It pisses me off. Okay? A bunch of egos think they know better, and in the course of doing it, they'll create really bad case law that screws us all. And on that, John Conroy, come up with a video to explain your actions. Okay? Because you're being called on being a traitor to the cause right now. On that, thank you very much.